evening and welcome to the Moving Home with Charlie weekly workshop with Charlie Lambden and guests. Live at 8 p.m. every Wednesday. This show is here to help all home movers of the UK be better prepared for dealing with the gauntlet that is trying to move home.
Helping make sure everyone has a home.
Whether you're buying, selling or both, it's a live show. So if you have a question about your move, pop it in the live chat. In the meantime, sit back, have a noisy slurp of your drink and enjoy the show.
Sorry, I can't resist it.
You're getting that slurp in.
Good evening, everybody. I'm slurping beer instead of tea because I'm in a random hotel. I have a mobile internet connection. So forgive me for internet for connectivity problems. It's the best I can do. The show must go on no matter what. Welcome to the weekly movers. I'm actually in a public space. We're going to hear think what I'm talking about. Welcome to another weekly workshop on Wednesday, and it's all about movers Q&As. Normally, Alex joined towards the end of this show, but for reasons I won't be with, I'm starting with this evening. But tonight's main guest is Devon estate agent David Turnbull, who is waiting patiently in the wing to come on and make your questions. So if you have questions, especially about the Devon property market, but also if you are a seller and you've got questions about how to deal with your agent, if you're having difficulties with your agent, and anyone from anywhere who's got questions for an agent, please put your questions in the live chat. Please say question. I will come to the questions afterwards. And if the internet connection is terrible, there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to keep pressing on. If you actually lose me completely, then tell me. But otherwise, there's nothing I can do, guys. Is it unbearable? Alex, you can just tell me if it's if.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit better now. Just don't move too much.
Okay, well, as long as the audio is good, that doesn't matter about the picture so much.
Yeah.
So, questions in the live chat for the agent guest, especially if it's about Devon. He is an estate agent from Devon, who I've never met in real life, but we've been in communication since I started this show on online and via social media stuff. And I think he's one of the good guys. So we'll find out shortly. Now, Alex.
Yes, Charlie.
Can I put something up on screen and have a little bit of a rant about it?
Yeah, go for it.
This story came out on the Times website today. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing.
Calm down, Charlie. Calm down.
Everyone should calm down, he says, about both the Chancellor and the economy. The pile-on against Rachel Reeves has been silly and unedifying. I didn't know unedifying was a factor in this discussion. Never mind. Anyway, I put it to you, and what I'd like to discuss with you in the next 10 minutes or so, is that this is a gaslighting piece about the government and the economy. It's someone somewhere has gone, who can we get to put out a piece to just calm everything down? And of course, a lot of people that you and I know, especially of our parents' generation, go, well, if it's in the Times, it must be true because it's the Times.
That's true.
Right? Isn't that true? Right? There are people who do not question a word that's printed in the Times. It's absolutely good. Charlie, it's the Times newspaper. It's world famous. Don't be ridiculous. Of course, it's whatever they say is absolutely right. Anyway, let me just. So he talks about how lots of chancellors have had difficult starts to their. He talks about Geoffrey Howe. He talks about George Osborne. Yes. Okay, but he then starts to do what I'm thinking is the gaslighting. Make no mistake, she's a bona fide former Bank of England, and those of us who don't speak Latin will think, well, bona fide, I don't know what it means, but sounds impressive. So, okay, he's a bona fide former Bank of England economist, as those who worked alongside her have attested. Have they? I haven't seen anyone working alongside her who has attested that yet. Maybe I'm wrong. Was clearly rated highly by the bank when it chose to work as an intern in Washington, as part of the bank and treasury team. It was and is a plum posting, he says. Blah, blah, blah. Let me just go to the bits I've highlighted. So he then starts saying about how she's having a hard time and it's not her fault, right? So figures showing a rise in inflation from 1.7% to 2.3% were greeted as terrible news and blamed on the government. No, I don't think anyone's blamed this inflation readout on her, because that wouldn't make sense. I don't think anyone's blamed on her, but were almost entirely a predictable consequence of what economists would call energy price base effects. Now, listen here. You won't understand what base effects are, but that doesn't matter. Just take it from me because I'm a Times columnist, all right? It's an energy price base effect, and that means everything's okay. Now, as you and I discussed, I think last week when Sasha Yanchin put his video out, he actually showed, using the government's own data, that the energy part of the inflation was actually a negative effect on this month's readout, not a positive one. And so this is why I think either he is not a very good economist and hasn't done the number crunching himself and looked at himself, or he's gaslighting. I can't think of any other explanation. A couple more points on there before I stop ranting. Even the apparent sharp slowdown in GDP, apparent, not actually a sharp slowdown, but an apparent one, you understand. Growth in the third quarter, blah, 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 was not quite what it seemed. And goes on to talk about why you've misunderstood if you think the apparently sharp slowdown is not apparently sharp at all. The big picture is that the economy is growing, if only modestly, maintaining the sluggish pattern of recent years. Yeah. Growth next year should be better than this. And don't question me because I'm a Times economist. Growth next year should be better than this. And he finishes up by saying, they underlined, so he talks about how public borrowing was way above forecast. Well, he didn't say it's above forecast. He government and said, underlined the chart is very difficult fiscal inheritance, not her at all. And the budget being encouraged to put public finances on a sound footing. Would have been, this is for me, it's the first part. In his last paragraph, he said, would have been better to reverse some or all of Hunt's pension cuts on employee insurance. In other words, he's saying, would have been better to attack rise on employees. Well, no, because she said she wasn't going to do that in her manifesto, so it wouldn't be better. She was going to say in advance, right? Rather than load it all onto employers' insurance, which businesses are understandably very angry about, but we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about arguably the biggest factor in the entire economy, in businesses fighting government en masse to say the employer's national insurance contributions increase combined with the minimum wage increase is going to cost thousands and thousands of jobs and price increases. So my opinion on this, as a random bloke on the internet, is this a classic piece of gaslighting. He can't possibly believe what he's saying, so either he's been put up to it, or he has this agenda. I don't know. Shut up. I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, well, look, I can't disagree with you. This is obviously a good news piece. I can understand why he's done it. In that, you know, what option? It's a bit like your housing pundits who continually talk up the market. I mean, they at least have a vested interest in that, in terms of many of them are making money from it. Whereas for this guy, I think, you know, it's telling that he chooses Howe and Osborne as his two chancellors, both of whom went into recession 6 months after taking power. You know, so that's an interesting intro to it. You know, I mean, Howe started in May of '79 when Thatcher won the election. And by January of 1980, we were in a serious recession, which continued on and off for about 3 years. So, you know, I think his meaning is that he's trying. Oh, Charlie, the noise is horrendous. There's lots of feedback. Yeah, there's. Oh, that's better. So, yeah, sorry. I don't think he has much option. What can he do? He can come out and say, well, actually, if you do GDP per capita, it's absolutely horrendous, and we're nowhere near even the sluggish growth that we had from 2000 onwards. He could do that, and then he could scare people into spending even less. Nothing that he said in that article, with the exception of the base energy effect, is factually incorrect. It's just spin. It's an old Alistair Campbell spin session. And I sort of understand it. You want the populace not to have a run on the banks. You don't want people cashing in their pensions and fleeing the country en masse. And he may be doing it because he thinks it's in the best interest of the population. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is the right thing to do. And yeah, it's a good news puff piece. I don't disagree with you at all. But I think the fact that he chose those two chancellors and that he then makes comments later on about the impact of NI and the businesses being justifiably angry suggests that he does understand the direction of travel. He's not a stupid man by all accounts. He's a very bright economist. He's been the lead economist for the Times for a long time. But yeah, he's doing his bit to calm the maddened masses.
Is my sound better now?
Yeah.
So he's doing. So you call it a spin puff piece, a good news puff piece. So what you're saying is he's exploiting his position of trust to calm everybody down, even though he knows things are worse than he's suggesting in that.
I think exploiting his position is a bit harsh, Charlie. As I say, what option does he have? He can either come out and say, right, I'm going to show some graphs of GDP per capita. I'm going to look into the ONS figures and prove that actually energy costs in terms of inflation are falling. They're still adding to inflation, but they're adding much less than they were a year ago. And therefore, it's other household costs. He could come clean and say, well, of course, spending has increased in November because November is the month that everybody now buys their Christmas presents because they buy everything online. So, yeah, of course, it's increased this month. He could do all those things. But how does that help the overall economy, which, let's face it, since the West stopped producing anything and being really meaningful in that respect, is based entirely on confidence. That's how our economy runs, is debt and confidence. We have to have confidence in our debt and we have to keep spending. Otherwise, our economy is stuffed. And, we both believe it's stuffed already. But what's he going to say? How's he going to help?
Okay. So it sounds like what you're doing is you're explaining his point, his reasoning or motivation for the article in a way that you think is understandable, but that doesn't mean you're agreeing. Is that right?
No, I do. No, sorry. I don't agree with his overall analysis, although the facts that he puts in there, by and large, are correct. It is spin. It's using, actual data in order to tell a story. Now, that story is demonstrably false, if you look at the data from a different perspective. So don't just look at GDP and say it's growing.
This is my proof with this, right? Just a couple of hours ago, I had a one video call with somebody who's now found themselves in tens of thousands of pounds of negative equity, having bought a flat in 2022, because, I quote, everyone I spoke to, all of the media, everyone said it was the right thing to do. Everyone said, my family said, look what the newspapers are saying. And my point and my grievance for this piece is that it's because of pieces like this, people who don't have time or wherewithal to dig into the behind the scenes of the numbers of the economy, that you and I do sometimes, are going to see this and be fooled into having confidence to go out and buy stuff. They don't think that there is economic again around the corner. So I'm wondering how this is a good thing, even with the best of intention, because the only result of it is people proceeding to purchase houses, for example, thinking that everything's going to be okay because this says it is.
Okay, so he's not telling anyone to buy a house. And if you read the subtext of his article, which is right there, he mentions two chancellors who went into recession. He talks about the fact, be careful what you wish for. Because the simple fact is that if he scares people off from buying, then our economy definitely crashes and definitely heads into recession. Now, you and I think that that will happen anyway. He obviously believes that perhaps if things work out, that may not be the case. So there are plenty of things in that article that say, look, we're not in for a smooth sailing. It's not as if everything is about to take off and be wonderful. Go spend, don't bother with it. It's all great. Live life like there's no tomorrow. He doesn't say that anywhere in that article. What he's trying to do is just make people carry on as normal, which will hopefully not stop things like consumer spending, etc., which would definitely close more businesses, although the NI piece is going to do that anyway. So again, I go back to, if you say he's misleading, yes. If you say he's exploiting his position, I think that's a bit harsh.
Okay, all right. Well, that's all we've got time for on this evening. For those of you who are members of the Stig Charlie show, are meeting in person. I'm actually going down to Stig's house this evening at 10 o'clock. If you remember, check your emails. I've linked to you there. If you're not yet a member and you'd like to be, join our, it's effectively a Zoom call, all of us together. You can join on this link here. We'll get into it in more detail. And you can, everyone in there, everyone gets their questions answered if you remember that group. So see those who are there later, and anyone else who'd like to join, I get an email to join at 10 o'clock. I'll send a link to you as well. Otherwise, thanks for now, Alex, and I will see you shortly.
Okay. Catch you later, Charlie.
All right.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Evening, David.
Evening, Charlie. You right?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I'm going to be putting my mic on mute every time I leave you to do the talking, and I'm going to leave you to do as much of the talking as I can. Now, let me start by asking you about this property, so someone of the private Charlie Movers, the Private Movers Live Q&A Club, which is where people can private message me their concerns, has given me permission to share this publicly. I'm not saying their name or anything, but just share it publicly. Let me get the property up on screen. Okay, so this lovely cottage, hang on, which is on the market for, I think, 550,000. I can't see the price there. Oh, there it is, top right-hand corner. But it has, so they paid cash for it a few years ago.
Yeah.
They're now looking to sell it, and they had sold it to a first-time buyer, but the buyer's lender, when they did the survey, said no because of the flood risk. And in the details, it does actually reveal in the written description of the property that the garden sometimes floods, but the house has its own flood defenses. Mm-hmm. And that buyer who was going to buy it, it fell through because three major lenders all said no. Okay. I've spoken to a couple of mortgage brokers and asked them, and I got different opinions from the two mortgage brokers. One of them said they've come across a similar situation before, and it took a bit of extra work and a couple of specialist lenders and a bit of reassurance, but actually they did get the lending through. The other broker said no, because everyone's expectations are that flood risks are only going to be getting worse, not better. In any case, the seller has asked me that she's sort of at the end of her tether. It's not on Rightmove at the moment. It is on the agent's website, but she's asking for advice because she's run out of ideas. It is, it's a beautiful place. It's beautifully done. The inside is absolutely, is really nicely done. Lovely. Absolutely lovely little chocolate box cottage. Hence, it's on the chocolate box website.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wondered if you've got any thoughts about how to sell a really tricky like that.
Yeah, well, obviously, first things first, you've got to really ascertain whether or not somebody can buy this with a mortgage first and foremost. What you mentioned there, materials, parts B and C now, which have come in, you've got to be very, very transparent with any instructions. So you have to put further information in there that could deter any buyer. So there's lots more information you've got to provide. I suppose the way I would look at it is that if we needed to find a buyer, then I would be looking at either buyers who are buying cash from proceeds of sale or cash buyers. But it doesn't sound to me as if you'd need to advertise it as cash buyers only. But I would again speak to a trusted mortgage advisor to find out if there's a specialist lender or if there's any way of around it. In terms of, have there been any insurance claims in their tenure? What is their home insurance premiums? But what you don't want to do is introduce another mortgage buyer knowing that it's very likely it's going to fall through again, Charlie. So
Okay.
there is some duty.
Sorry, I know. Listen, guys, I did have where to do this evening's live stream from. Okay, I can't do anything about my internet connection speed. All I can do is keep pressing on. What about? So she wanted to ask about whether she should consider going to auction with it, or actually, what other ideas are there? And I'd love to ask what you do with the asking price.
Oh, good question. Obviously, I haven't got the information in terms of how much they paid for it. What, are they making a loss on the sale? Because that's obviously where it gets very, very difficult if they are making a substantial loss. I hope I hope they aren't, but it all depends on when they bought it. Auction, again, comes down to where the auction company believe the guide needs to be, and also then where the reserve would need to be, because you don't want to take it to auction knowing it's going to fail if the guide and the reserve are too high. But it's certainly something that you can consider, but you just need to find out, are they going to be making a substantial loss on it? What's the reasons behind the sale? It looks stunning. I've had properties previously that have had the same issues, but it does come down to obviously the commitment of the buyer as well. So if there is a cash buyer or a cash from proceeds buyer that doesn't have to worry about a lender, then it's all about how committed that buyer is and how much common sense they've got that, okay, the garden floods, but if the house isn't going to flood, then I would feel quite confident I could still sell that and get the right price for it.
It's interesting, isn't it, though, that both you and one of the brokers suggested that if mortgage finance isn't available, that affects the value. Should it? This is my point. Why should the value of a property be affected by whether or not you can borrow money to buy it or not? Because that suggests that all properties' values are only up because of the availability of finance. And if there wasn't availability to borrow money, everyone's properties would be worth a lot less.
Yeah, it's a good point. I've had a couple of cash buyer only properties recently that for every 20 buyers, 17 of them who needed mortgages would have been very interested in buying it, and only 3 cash buyers. On average, a cash buyer only property is between 10 and sometimes even 25% less in value because you're so restricted on the amount of people that can buy it. Mortgage buyers are normally way more excited about buying somewhere and borrowing money to buy their dream home than a cash buyer who has the money in the bank, who are treading carefully and choosing carefully. So yeah, it does affect the value of a house for sure.
Well, that's fascinating that you say between 10 and 25%. I mean, in this situation, that's £125,000 potentially to come off the price of that.
Yeah, which on a property like this is very unfair because there's nothing structurally wrong with it. It's just this situation, and with flooding now, you've got to put in the flood risk data on a listing on a property, and it's going to become more and more commonplace. So yeah, is there any way they could try and stop the garden from flooding? But if it's got a flood risk, it's got a flood risk. It's heartbreaking, really. So I don't know what else to suggest, but you've got my number, Charlie. So if you want to pass it on,
you're
sorry,
more than welcome to. I was talking then and I forgot to unmute myself. When I said, looking at that photograph there, you can see in the top right-hand corner, the river is right there.
Yeah.
So there's not much you can do about the garden, but it looks like they've built up a sort of flood defense wall around the house, which makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that's been helpful. I mean, in the end, ultimately, the only thing you can really ever do to a property, if you've put its best foot forward in the marketing, the only thing you can do is lower the price, isn't it? That's in the end. It's just there's no other way around it.
Invariably, yeah.
Yeah. So, guys, anyone watching who's got a question about their estate agent or how to deal with an estate agent situation you've got, and you want to put it to David, please put it in the live chat. In the meantime, we have got one question. Not a lot of questions so far, but one I did want to put to you, which is an interesting one. Nick Jones asks, is it better to upsize Devon or Cornwall?
Depends on what lifestyle you want. There are some hot spots in Devon and Cornwall at the moment, but it comes into two different parts really. You've got your market towns in the sort of tends to be in the middle of Cornwall, which are good value for money. But then you've got your coastal areas where the prices go up dramatically. But I think, well, Devon's obviously just been surveyed that it's the nicest county to live in the country. So I'm a Devon boy, but I live literally 4 miles away from the border of Cornwall. And I think really depending on what lifestyle you want, do you want the moors? Do you want Dartmoor? Do you want the rivers on Dartmoor, or do you want to be closer to the coast? The North Cornwall coast is stunning. And it just depends on what lifestyle you want, where your work is. You've got the A30 and the A38 that go through Devon and Cornwall, which gives us very good transport links these days. You can get down almost to the bottom of Cornwall now from Devon within an hour and 45 minutes on a good day. But Plymouth at the moment is a very good hotspot. Properties are selling quite well in Plymouth and have been for a long time. And there are a lot of infrastructure improvements being made in the city. Exeter is, as you know, Charlie, is a hotspot and does very, very well with thousands of houses being built. But whether you're at the sort of the Devon, Dorset, Somerset border or not, everywhere is accessible now within 2 hours, whether you want to go to the south coast or the north coast. And it's cream first, by the way, just so you know, on the scones. So the cream is the butter, and the jam goes on top of the butter. So and Tavistock, where I live, born and bred, is where scones and cream first came from the monks. Originally Tavistock was a fortified river town. So apparently, allegedly, scones and cream came from Tavistock, Devon.
Okay, so yeah, that's interesting. No, I've been living in Devon for 12 years or whatever it is, 30 more than that now, and it's just the most wonderful place to live. But as property prices go, it's suffered. It enjoyed some of the. I say enjoyed. Some people enjoyed the house price rises. Some people did not enjoy the house price rises during COVID lockdown. Devon definitely saw a huge influx of buyers over the pandemic, didn't it? And I think that's one of the reasons why it's seeing. I mean, it's even on the ONS website where you can look at house prices by region. Devon, I think, along with Suffolk, is seeing the biggest falls of any county in the country. Has seen the biggest falls, especially at the higher end of the market. Now, I understand. As an estate agent, you're always going to be optimistic, especially when you've got clients like watching you. They don't want to hear you saying anything about it. But I keep an eye in the North Devon market where I am now, and that particular borough actually is one of the worst in the country. It was named Torridge, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's got one of the biggest house price falls of anywhere in the country. There's one other place again up in East Anglia that was the second. So, I mean, it's a tougher market than usual, isn't it? Overall.
Yeah, it is. There's been a few reports coming out recently that the cities seem to be faring quite well with a lot of chimney pots, but your market towns, we're Torridge and West Devon, so it's been a very, very challenging year this year. It all comes down to pricing, Charlie. I've just had a property just exchanged that was on with another agent previous to me at 675. Came across to me at 625, and we sold it a month later at 575. So it gives you an idea that that particular property probably found itself on the market at £100,000 more than it as it subsequently should have been. And that's not, and the rest of the houses that are still on the market are because they are unfortunately too much money.
Well, I mean, you've pretty much backed up my view, which is not all sellers, but many sellers of what Rightmove calls top of the ladder properties around the country. I think their expectations are around about 20% too high. And that example you gave just now says exactly that. They were on at 675 and it eventually sold for 575.
Yeah,
that's not quite 20% off, but it's and I mean, when you took it on at 625, you said, didn't you?
Yeah, 625.
Did you know it was still going to go for less than that? Was that the price you had to agree in order to manage the seller's expectations? Because a lot of buyers are just wondering why are asking prices so often so far over the actual selling price?
Yeah, so this one was already on the market, so it was the first time I dealt with it. So it was on at 675. When I went and saw it, it was a lovely house, and I said, hand on heart, that it needed to be offers over 600. Bearing in mind, when you meet a stranger that you want to do business with, telling them that the house is potentially £75,000 overpriced, it's not easy to do that, because you know, at the end of the day, you've got to speak your truth and give them the best advice you can. But the chance, in the back of my head, I was expecting them to show me the door relatively swiftly after that. But you can only tell them what you think. So I said offers over 600. They wanted to go for a slightly more sort of cautious price of 625, which I agreed to, because at least it was a £50,000 correction. And then we had that usual 2 to 3 weeks bounce, really, and had a bit of interest in it. However, the difference being is that seller had to move. So it wasn't a case of we'd like to move, it was we had to move. They're moving back to the States. So all part of their plan. So they had to move. So they then sold their property for what the market was prepared to pay for it.
I was about to ask you, do you ever is it too awkward to have that conversation when you first meet a seller and say, it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what I think, it only matters what the market thinks?
Yes, it does. But to give you an idea, is that there's 2 ways to that. If you have a realistic vendor, they fully understand that, yes, they're only going to sell it for what the market dictates it will sell for. But then they spin it sometimes and say, yes, it'll only sell for what the market's prepared to pay. But of course, they're thinking in that direction rather than thinking in that direction, in a rising market, in a falling market. So, but it comes down to whether or not sellers need to move or want to move or would like to move, and that's an important question for any buyer.
Well, I think that's why I always recommend sellers who intend to move should always get their sale pack prepared before they come to the market, because then they're demonstrating commitment to selling, and it also makes it a more attractive purchase and a faster transaction as well. I've got a few questions coming now, so let's get through some of these. This is a tough question, but I'd just love to see how you answer it. John Mark Bordeaux says, how do you even choose an estate agent? What do I look for? It's the hardest question to answer, because I get it all the time. Okay, Charlie, you said it's important that we've got to choose our agent carefully, but how do we know a good from a bad one?
Well, obviously, with what you're doing, Charlie, at the moment, I think you know as much as anyone else, really. But estate agents know who the bad ones are, and they know who the good ones are. It's so hard to put your finger on it, because I go out to properties where I just don't gel with the seller of the property. I was probably the best agent for them, but for whatever reason we didn't get on. It comes down to who you want to work with. So some people might meet somebody and go, I think they're the best things at sliced bread, but they've made the worst decision possible. I think you've got to do your research. So Google reviews, I think, are very, very good for that. Go through Google reviews, go through quite a lot of them. The vast majority of self-employed estate agents now, like myself, we have 100% 5-star reviews. So I think I've got 56 or 53 5-star reviews. There's no 4.7 or 4.3 or 4.9. I'm 5.0, as are a lot of self-employed individual estate agents. However, that does come down to a lot of estate agents will have a lettings department. And unfortunately, with tenants leaving reviews, they can sometimes be a bit savage. So I think some estate agents that have got 4.3 on Google or Trustpilot or something like that may have just come across a slightly disgruntled tenant in the past. But go through the sales reviews, I would suggest. The other option I would be, if the estate agent has a high street office, is to go make a visit. I would also, if it was me and I was selling a house, I'd send a inquiry. So I'd send an inquiry through for a property and just find out how quickly they respond and how they respond. And I don't want to go as far as actually go and view a property with the agents before you decide who you're going to sell with. A bit difficult if it's disingenuous and you're actually not physically looking in the properties. But if you're looking locally, don't just get your agents out and decide who to go out and view a few houses with the local agents and find out who you think turns up on time, knows the property before you know, inside out, give you the time to look round, professional, friendly, knowledgeable. I would do it backwards, where I'd actually could probably go and view houses if I was looking locally, and then that's a very good way of choosing your estate agent. So I do all of my own viewings, and sometimes I'll meet buyers and show them around houses with a house to sell, and then things lead on where we have a relationship. They can see how I show people around houses, and then that makes them feel a bit more comfortable about the decision that they're making. But you've got to do your research. Don't just have the agents out and decide on the sort of the Vanity Fair of estate agents swafting through your house. Try and speak to friends and family and get their opinion.
Yeah, I would pick up one of the things that you said at the start of that response, which was about how it's who you get on with. Because the way I see it is that a seller and an agent are working in partnership. You're a team. You both need the same outcome. You both need the same objective, which is the house sold in the shortest or in the required time frame and at the best price. That's what both of you want. And if you don't have a good working relationship and communications relationship, then you're going to struggle, because there, as I'm sure you know, that there are often difficult discussions to have with sellers, aren't there? So that working relationship is really, really important. And at the moment, there isn't a straightforward, guaranteed way of getting the agent. The only thing I would say to everybody is, do not sign long-term sole agency agreements. I recommend the maximum you agree to is 8 weeks. Roll it 2 weeks just after that is the maximum. Because if an agent says we need more than 2 months to get you an offer, something's automatically wrong there, I think. What do you think about the sole agency contracts?
I do a 0-week contract, and then I only need 1 week's notice to terminate. So it's pretty much user friendly as it can be. Yeah, any agent that's looking at a 12-week contract or longer, or even 8 weeks or longer, I would avoid. And at the end of the day, you will be able to negotiate that. So you say, yeah, love what you're about. We want to use you, but we want a 0-week contract. And if that agent says no, we can't do that, move on. Absolutely move on. Move on to the next agent.
I would agree with that. I think I've had a couple of agents convince me that actually sometimes 4 weeks isn't fair. If they've said to the seller, that price that you want to go on at is higher than I'm recommending, and that's going to make my job harder, and I'm going to be spending money on marketing. So if you want me to go on at that price, if you're insisting me on that price, I need at least 4 weeks guaranteed to do it. And after 2 weeks, we drop the price. You know? So I get that argument. It's very important. I love that people hear you say this. A lot of sellers, especially first-time sellers, don't even realise that they're signing an exclusivity agreement that they're going to be tied in. Most sellers don't even know they're doing that. And the ones who do assume that's the standard. And you're right, it's not. You can always negotiate that. And every single time, if you want to go with an agent and you say, I'm happy with 12 weeks, but I do 4 or 6, most agents would be okay. You know, and if they won't, then it's definitely is the time to push back an agent and say, why do you need so long to sell my house? To get it offer.
It's an argument you'd win every time. It's you either do let's say for argument's sake, you either do a 4-week contract or I don't use you. and they'll buckle. They'll buckle every time.
This is a good question from Who Wants to Know on YouTube. It says, other than flood risk, how much does the EPC rating affect sale prospects of a property?
I think any EPC up to an E, and borderline an F, and this is where it obviously needs some serious improvement to improve the energy rating of the property, in my opinion, doesn't affect the saleability of the property at all. So because anything that's right down at the very, very bottom, which would be a G, or literally between 0 and 10, the lowest rating you can get, there's bound to be improvements that need to be made to that house anyway. So a lot of properties that need a huge amount of work will be low. Obviously, it used to be where if a property was an E, you couldn't let it out. But I'll have to be honest, the buy-to-let market down here is died a death. So I don't have very, very few buy-to-lets apart from very low end in the market. But no, EPC, in my opinion, it does not affect the saleability of the property, because you're trying to sell somebody who sees it as their next home, rather than looking at the small print of how you can improve it to be any warmer during the year, and the fact it's going to save you 189 quid by putting energy saving light bulbs in or anything like that over a 5-year period. So no, it doesn't affect it, in my opinion.
But there are a lot of big old drafty houses in Devon, and since the energy costs went up, heating those has become a real, whereas it used to just be a bit expensive, it's now become life-changingly expensive. You've got a big drafty old house, hasn't it?
Mm. Yeah, it has. Obviously, if a property is listed, then there's only certain limitations you can do to increase the energy efficiency of the property anyway, certainly if you can't put UPVC windows in. But again, a big old drafty property, character property, the buyers want that because that's exactly what they're looking for. If you want to buy an high energy rated modern new build, there's plenty of those around. But not everybody wants to buy a modern property. They want character. So with that comes a house that's going to cost you a lot of money to heat up.
So Patricia says, the problem with big estate agents is you may deal with a senior person to start with, but viewings are done by anyone in the office, mostly young and inexperienced. Hence, independent estate agents are much better, in my opinion. Yeah. Generally speaking, that's there are exceptions to that. There are sometimes you get very well run offices where the negotiators are well trained, and even if they're not the senior people. But generally speaking, Patricia, I agree with that. Next question is this one first. Jean-Marc Bordeaux again says, does new houses being built near yours means that your house is worth more?
Good question. Depends what they're building, how many they're building, and how it's going to affect the infrastructure locally to yours. So if they're building enough houses where a school is in the offing, then that's going to obviously make your local infrastructure a little bit better. Are they going to build new roads? Are they going to be investing into the local infrastructure as well? And again, what sort of houses are they buying? Is there a lot of smaller flats, 2 beds, 1 bed social housing, or are they actually going in to build a lot of detached 3 beds, 4 beds? But ultimately, as long as it doesn't affect you very, very close by, so you're not losing a view, or you had fields behind you and you now haven't. I sometimes think that new builds in a good development would probably have a positive effect on the value of homes locally.
A couple of questions for you coming from X. Will Hamlet, who I think is an agent, actually. I think he's an agent of the politician, saying, why is everyone leaving? The last several applicants are fleeing to Dorset. That's an answer to asking questions for you. Are there Devon sellers fleeing to Dorset?
The what? Sorry?
Are there Devon vendors who are selling to Devon moving to Dorset?
I haven't seen that. I've seen it go the other way. I've had a lot of buyers moving down from Wales lately. So a lot of people leaving Wales.
And James Davis also says, any investment in the southwest, Devon or Somerset area besides student accommodation? I think you kind of answered that with your fact you said that the buy-to-let side are down, isn't it?
Yeah, well, student accommodation. I don't know what that market looks like these days, but it's not an investment that I would necessarily look at, depending on where the university is, whether it's Exeter or Plymouth. Um, the Plymouth market's very different to what it used to be, and that was where we used to sell a lot of student accommodation.
Another question here. Surf Morph on YouTube says, as a cash buyer, is there any benefit in registering with agents? They've only ever sent me stuff after they've put on Rightmove, and I think they increase prices of homes they think I'll view.
If you're a cash buyer and what we call a hot buyer, I don't know if many people know what a hot buyer is. A hot buyer is somebody that's going to buy a house within the next 10 to 14 days. So you show them a house that they really like, they will buy it. So if you're a cash buyer where you really need to sell it somewhere to live, then register with every single estate agent locally to you. Tell them why you want to buy, when you want to buy. Say that you're a cash buyer, and you should be at the very, very top of their list if they get anything on the market that's suitable. I think as far as estate agents are concerned, I think there is no better feeling than finding out your list has just come back with a new instruction that you know is going to suit Mr. and Mrs. Smith perfectly, your cash buyer, and you get straight on the phone and go, guess what? I've just heard that we've just put something on the market that's perfect for you. I've got the keys. When would you like to go and have a look at it? And I can't imagine there aren't decent estate agents out there that love that part of the job more than anything else. I still do, and I've been doing this 20 years. So yeah, register with every single estate agent locally, and then it's up to them to give you a shout. But don't wait for the stuff to go onto Rightmove, because exactly what I just said there might be happening with another buyer that's registered, and you didn't even get to look at it.
Got a good question here from Jane W on YouTube. Question: offer accepted at 850,000 from a 1.1 million pound asking price in Surrey. Was on the market over a year ago. Price reduced 5 times with one offered fallen through. The house needs refurb. Negotiated another 25,000 off. Is it sensible? I love that. Is it sensible?
Oh, well, okay, I'll go into that. So 1.1 million, it was on the market for over a year ago. So what you'll find is that 1.1 million house should have probably gone on the market for 950,000 a year ago. So you're I've got to say, if you're now paying 825, you're probably paying the market value for that house. If you take in the analogy that most houses are selling for a certain percent below their asking prices, the 1.1 million pound house probably should have gone on at 950 a year ago, minus 100,000. So yeah, you've got a good purchase with a smile, wry smile, but you're certainly not paying massively lower than its market value.
See, this is another story where it backs up what I'm saying, which is so many sellers at the top of the ladder section have got about 20%. Their expectations about 20%. So that's £250,000 off that 1.1 million. So that's over 20% off the initial asking price. I want to keep on saying this to sellers because I just really want all sellers to consider: am I maybe innocently just falling victim to this misplaced expectation that the whole market seems to have, where we're all starting off with our asking prices 20% too high on top of the ladder properties? It's not the same at the bottom it's not the same at first time buyer level or middle level. It's not the same there. I'm only talking about the top of the ladder stuff, but literally it's about 15 to 20% anywhere you go. I've got this is a tough one. This is a buyer's question. Jason on YouTube says, I'm 41, desperate for my first home, at my wit's end, soul destroying. Agreement in principle for a mortgage of 150,000, nothing but leasehold flats with rip-off service charges, short leases. The cost of everything is sky high. Hopeless. I think that's how a lot of buyers are feeling, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. Certainly when you're at that part of the market. My first thoughts always would be is look at shared ownership if it's available within the vicinity you're looking at. Um, is go for a shared ownership, get on a list, and see whether or not that's within your remit of being able to buy 40-50% of a property with the rent on top. You've then got a freehold house. There'll be very few, it won't be leasehold, there won't be ridiculous service charges of, I don't know, 60, 70, £100 a month. And it's a good way of getting on the ladder of living in a house, buying a house, living in a house, rather than living in a flat that you, at 41 years old, probably feels like you're so far down the ladder. And I can understand, why he feels like he does. Or just be patient
Yeah,
and maybe wait for a different type of flat to come up that maybe doesn't have a service charge.
I mean, I would just say all you can do is keep looking, and you're right. Look for ones that have got slightly less bad leases, because again, leasehold is difficult. It's not ideal buying a leasehold, because a leasehold is a depreciating asset. If it's a 100-year lease, every year it's worth 1% less intrinsically, on top of whatever else is happening in the market. Service charges are a big risk if they aren't controlled. And as I've said many times on this channel, we're in this position because of endless extra borrowing, endless extra buy-to-let lending, allowing people to buy stuff up they couldn't have bought before, and the Help to Buy scheme, which has inflated new build prices 20% outside London, 40% inside London. Now that that's ended, that will, for the same reason that first lady asking about why can't I sell my flood risk house, why can it only go to cash buyers? And you said, David, if it's cash buyers only, it's 10 to 25% less than it would be if you could get mortgage buyers interested as well. So, I think we are seeing a gradual, and possibly, if I'm right about the economy next year, accelerating downward trend. I don't see a crash. I've never seen a crash. I've always said it's going to be a slide. But I do, and I think, David, would you agree that in some areas the market has moved down further than the agents expected, and it's caught some agents off guard as well?
No, I don't think so. In our areas, we've dealt with the normal market before. We've dealt with tough markets before. I think we were at the end of 2022 or August, September 2022. I think we were all in shock of what was about to happen on top of the market that we'd had enjoyed, to be fair, for a good couple of years. But this year hasn't been any worse than I would have expected. Actually, it's just been a normal market, Charlie, this year. And just doing proper agency and selling properties. So I hear some relatively good stories out there in some markets that are going really, really well. Equally, I hear of very, very tough markets in a lot of areas. I went out to a property a few days ago, which is I lost instruction, I don't know, 5 months ago. Yeah, 5.5 months ago, and I just touched base. They've had 2 viewings in 5.5 months. Um, I couldn't believe it. 2 viewings in 5.5 months, and the property isn't vastly overpriced. It's not a million miles away, but they've literally had 2 viewings. Absolutely crazy. But that is the same out there at the moment. You're putting some stuff on the market, and it's like tumbleweeds, Charlie. There's just no interest whatsoever, and it's just all comes back down to price. Whether it's £25,000 overpriced, 50, 100. I suppose the one thing that confuses me a bit as the estate agent is that when you're selling your property, when you're getting no interest at all, it always seems the onus always seems to be on the estate agent to pick the phone up and say, "We need to review your price. We're not getting any interest." It always seems to be one-way traffic, really. Why, if I was selling my house and I wasn't getting any interest, I'd be saying, "What do we need to do? Do we need to bring the price down?" And then I don't know whether or not that's just down to the market or people's opinions these days. But yeah, depends where you are in the country to how optimistic or pessimistic you are about the market.
Right, I think this is the last one for this. Sundays on YouTube has got a happy story about shared ownership. We can recommend shared ownership. We staircased up and have just listed our house for sale after 25 years as a family home in Devon. So if I'm understanding that correctly, it means that they managed to buy a family home 25 years ago using shared ownership, and they've staircased up till they own the whole thing outright, and now they're selling it. So that it can work out in the long run. I think short term shared ownership is much less of a good idea, but in the long term, I mean, whether or not it's the same now, 25 years ago, the overall house prices in the last 25 years have done pretty well. They're not going to do the same in the next 25 years, I don't think, certainly in the next 10 years anyway, because there isn't going to be the same supply of stimulated mortgage market and Help to Buy, that kind of stuff. But it's nice to hear a happy story.
Yeah.
Right, guys, it's time to wrap up. David, thank you very, very much indeed for joining this evening. I'd just like to tell everybody that David, I've got a link to David's website and his Facebook page in the description below. If you're watching on YouTube or on LinkedIn, or if you're listening on the podcast, it's in the show notes underneath. So if you're in West Devon and you'd like some advice on your move, give David a call, because I think he's one of the good guys. We still haven't met in real life, but I can tell you're one of the good guys, David.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. And listen, thanks very much for your time this evening and your answers and your advice. All the best. And I'm going to just wrap up the show without you now. So Brilliant. See you soon. Thanks, David. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, everybody. Thanks very much. I have now got one short hour before we kick off the Charlie and Stig show. With I understand that we've got wine this evening. So if you remember, check your emails. I have emailed you the link for tonight's show. If you're not a member, you'd like to join, then the link is on the screen right now. If you want to join. Otherwise, to everyone, have a fantastic evening. What's the day today? It's Wednesday. Of course it is Wednesday. And I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye, guys.